great to see folks this morning. And it's a beautiful day. And yesterday, whether you were there and whether you felt it or not, maybe you did feel it, but we had a transitional shift happen yesterday in our city from one mayor and city council to another mayor and city council. So it was a busy day, whether you're aware of it, it was. And it's a really great example. I think I look out my windows, right? And nothing looks really different out there. And yet we're sitting in a different context this morning than we were yesterday. Have no idea exactly where we're headed. So some could say that this is all a leap of faith that we've voted ourselves into, right? And we're going to give it our best. Yesterday afternoon at 3, there was a blessing of the new city council. It was beautiful. San Fernando Cathedral. Some of you were there. Thank you. We had more people there than we've had in the last 8 years. The thing is, now you won't be able to experience it again for 4, which I think is good news for our city with some continual leadership, our 2-year terms. We can have that conversation some other time, but it really doesn't give us a lot of chance to really, get in the groove of things in those 2 years. So it is going to be an interesting 4 years to see how this plays out. This morning, and I see that David is here, so we're good there. And I'm going to make sure that this share screen is good for him when he's ready. But we're going to start with some announcements, as we always do, to get as many participants in here as we can before we start. Does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to make while I think of some?
I'll jump in real quick, Ann.
You go, Bill.
Sacred is working on two additional projects over the summer and into the fall, building additional portals on our site. One is around substance use, and so we'll be building a page specifically dedicated to resources for substance use and rehabilitation, and so forth, including for individuals as well as families and kids. So we will be doing listening sessions on this. So if you have interest in this topic, we're going to be sending out invitations to community listening sessions for people to talk about the needs and the things that they're doing in that particular space. We'd love for you to participate. We're doing the same thing also for a portal around IDD, special needs and other disability support for individuals as well as families and caregivers of people in that community. And so we're going to need both of those. We're going to need feedback from the community on both of those topics. So if that's something you're interested in or something that you have an opinion on, then we'd love to hear from you. So we'll be sending out invitations through a mailing list. So if you join a mailing list, you'll get invitations to the listening sessions, and we'd love to have you. Those will be done over the summer, probably through the end of August. You're muted, Ann.
If you send me that invitation too, I'll just send it out just to folks at the intersection.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. The substance use portal in particular, I think, needs a lot of, there's a lot of faith community involvement in that space. And so I would really like to hear from faith communities that have outreach, not just that act as hosts to recovery meetings, but that have really taken an interest in this problem within their membership.
In fact, what if we set up one of the intersections just to do that as a focus group?
Yeah.
How much time would you need?
We usually do the full community sessions usually run 90 minutes, but we can do a shorter version.
Well, we could still do 90, but we could do like the meat of it as we do with all intersections.
Yeah. Okay.
Between 8 and 8:30. So anybody who would need to, wanted to, get the information and get that rolling, but then others who would be willing to stay for another hour could do that.
Sure.
We could try it.
You could try it.
So let's talk about that. It's 8:07, And we've done a lot of talking this morning, at least Bill and I. So, again, I'm glad everybody has joined us. I wanted to share with you today, um, I would say a new model, but it's not. It's really an older model of reaching into community to create community, which is what community art organizing is, that probably in all of our faith traditions and religions, if we thought about it, there is this model in those traditions of a leader, a person. So I'm kind of inviting you to think of some of those stories, and it's not just in our faith traditions and religions. We've got those models that we've seen before, but especially in our day and age, as we get to be so many more people, um, and utilizing technology as our communication tool, our main one, we can miss the wisdom of one-to-one encounter and going to people where they are for who they are and inviting them to come together. So I'm hoping that at least some of you are making that connection in your head from somewhere with someone, in story, could even be in mythology, but a way of inviting people in and together. Um, Many times that's been around one person, but a community itself, and I think that was the invitation that's been given, ancient invitation, is that a community itself can go to community and make more community. So we're working on a model and have been for a couple years here in San Antonio. That's a community organizing model that's youth led and youth voiced. And one of the things that's come out of a lot of our work over these years is how we really need to be intentional, not just wonder where our young people are at and why they're not showing up, and how do we, that we've been working at, how do we do it and actually do it. And so I've invited David, and some of you have met him before here at the intersection because he does speak up and speak out. But I invited David Davis. He's with WeBridge SA, an example of this model, as well as YLM, uh, Youth Lead Mission. And he's going to share with us today the model. How does this work? And our hope is a transformation of youth in reach itself across the entire geography. We've got these piloted models, but hundreds of these areas and ways and thousands would change all of us. So, David, are you there? And have I given away everything?
No, you haven't. I appreciate that. I mean, that is the perfect lead up to this conversation that we're gonna about to have this morning. If you, can you give me just 1 second? I think on
Sure.
this Juneteenth day, I had one of my little puppers run to the backyard and forgot her way back in.
Oh, so we'll let him do that, right?
Okay.
Um, Here he is. That was about just 1 second. I was trying to find some filler, but you're here. It's all yours. And the
Yes,
screen
thank
is
you.
open for you in case you need it.
Fantastic. I am going to actually share that if that's okay. Everyone able to see the title page?
Yep, I can.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I just wanted to thank you, Reverend Dr. Ann, for this platform and allowing us to present with from WeBridge SA's perspective, along with YLM, sitting on the board of YLM. I wanted to go ahead and give you, thanks for that, to allowing us to go ahead and voice that what is taking place, a transformation that is taking place. So thank you once again. And I want to thank, all of the individuals that are on this call, for the work that you do to keep our communities moving forward. Now, we're here today to talk about something that is, pretty powerful, something that's already starting to reshape our neighborhoods. It's shifting narratives and it's demanding new ways of thinking. And that is youth-led community organizing, which is for lasting change. Across our city and beyond, the young people are not waiting to be invited into leadership. They're already leading. They're already doing it. And we'll exemplify some of those positions where this is taking place. They're organizing around justice, they're organizing around mental health, they're organizing around their community safety, around housing, education, equity. And this is not from theory. They're doing it from their lived experiences. They're asking the hard questions, they're proposing bold solutions, and doing the work of change with courage and clarity. Now, as a community, as community leaders, our role isn't to speak for these individuals, it's to listen, to learn, and to create space where their leadership can thrive. This conversation isn't, just about investing in our youth programs. It's about investing in the youth power. Because when we support the youth as organizers, strategists, and visionaries that we are on this call, we're not just building a better future, we're strengthening our communities and we're doing it right now. So let's approach this moment with humility, with curiosity, and a commitment to walk with our young people and not just ahead of them. Okay. So as you can see, the first question that that poses our minds or that you may be wondering about is why the youth voice matter. Now, when we talk about youth and the young people, especially those growing up in neighborhoods like 78207, which is the near west side, the lowest AMI in all of Bexar County, average median income. When you talk about 78203 in the top five of the lowest average median income, and then when you take a look at 78223, where crime is quite prevalent within that particular zip code, we need to be honest about the realities they face. These young people are navigating, daily challenges like food insecurities, gun violence, school pushouts, and constant police presence. But here's what's often missed. You know, these young people are already building their own support systems. They're sharing food, they're organizing rides with each other, they're creating safe spaces. These aren't signs of a deficiency. They're signs of resilience and leadership. And make no mistake, ladies and gents, youth are already organizing. They're leading walkouts, mobilizing on social media, raising awareness about climate change, gun violence, mental health, racial justice. The problem isn't that the youth aren't involved, it's that they're often not taken seriously. We just don't take them seriously. We have to move beyond tokenizing their input and start recognizing their role as full partners in change. Now, this shift does matter, especially when we think about long-term impact. In San Antonio, we are, we have nearly 1 in 5 that is, hit pretty hard in poverty. And this is where the youngest children are hit the hardest. We can't afford to ignore the power of youth leadership. When young people are engaged, they build agency for themselves, whether it's in the gangs, whether it's in mentorship programs or just themselves, and then they're what these people are, when they get engaged, they build these agencies for themselves and are looking to break intergenerational cycles of poverty and powerlessness in their communities. Now, one of the most powerful things youth bring to the table is their sense of urgency and clarity. They haven't been conditioned to accept that's just how it is. They ask the bold questions like, why can't we fix this? And they deserve real answers and decision-making power. And the truth is, when youth help shape programs and policies, those initiatives work better. The youth-led research and code design services are
Month.
more.
And then our tips and best practices for writing really good prompts.
I'm sorry.
We're good. Somebody just had their mic open. It's
Oh, okay.
good. It happens.
No worries, no worries. So we were talking about how, the youth-led research and the co-design services, they're more likely to be like trauma informed because the youth are in their neighborhoods and quite a bit of them, have a lot of trauma. So their design and their research is trauma informed. It's culturally relevant to the communities that they are a member of, and they actually meet the needs of their community. Their lived experience is a critical asset that we should be building with and just not around. Getting youth involved early also has long-term benefits. When, young people feel that their voices matter, they're more likely to vote, to volunteer, and to stay civically engaged, well into their adulthood. Youth organizing today is, how we develop tomorrow's advocates, the nonprofit leaders, and city council members. It's a steady pipeline and pipe stream of leaders that we could go ahead and develop. But I want you to know that, this isn't about doing young people a favor. The youth already have a voice. Our job as adults and institutions is to listen, to support, and to sometimes just get out of their way. You know, they're not looking for charity. They're looking for justice today. And when we people here on the call get it right, the youth are empowered to lead, then our communities thrive. The strong, youth leadership doesn't just benefit individual kids, it lifts families, it strengthens neighborhoods, and it helps challenges systems that have failed them for generations. I use the model that youth power is community power. Okay, let's see if I can get this to go to the next. Now, there are 7 foundations of youth leading organizations that we found. YLM, as Reverend Ann just discussed earlier, have really started to, look at various models and started to really just delve into the practice of practicing, these various models. And we've started to, figure out that there's these 7 foundation components of youth leading organizations. Now, when we talk about these youth leading organizations, we're not just talking about young people getting involved. As I've stated earlier, we're talking about, young people leading. It's a big difference when we sit here and say, hey, this is, we're going to go ahead and provide the strategy, the design, and the program, and this is what you're going to go ahead and do. Give us feedback. That was something that WeBridge did, quite well, we thought. But then as we've, kind of intertwined with the youth leading mission group, they really challenged us to look at the model differently in a position where the youth are actually leading the conversation and the adults or the leaders, quote unquote, the adult leaders are just being in a position where they facilitate for the youth. Now, it makes a big difference in true youth leading organizations. It's the youth themselves who identify the issues, they shape the strategies, and they take the lead on the actions. Now, adults, we're there to support, not to steer. Our role is to mentor, to open doors, and to provide resources, but not to take over. At the heart of youth, led organizing, are a few core values that really set it apart. First is, power sharing. Youth aren't given symbolic roles as, to just, weigh in after decisions are, already made. They have real influence. Then there's the autonomy, where the youth organizers make their own decisions, set the agenda, and stay accountable, to each other. And then finally, this work is liberation focused. It's not about charity or short-term fixes. It's about justice, equity, and real systemic change. And here's why this model works so well. Young people bring a raw, honest view of what's happening in their communities, plain and simple. They see the gaps, they feel the urgency, and because they haven't been conditioned to accept the status quo, they're more likely to, push boundaries, ask the hard questions, and dream even bigger. Their organizing is often intersectional, meaning they tackle overlapping issues like racism, gender equality, immigration, economic justice, injustice actually, and more, all at once. But it's not about the impact that they have on their communities, it's about what they gain in that process. Organizing teaches these young people real world skills that many adults didn't learn until later in life. We're talking public speaking, managing budgets, building coalitions, navigating policy, using digital tools, which they are just phenomenal at today, to do this level of advocacy for themselves. And unlike traditional programs that aim to train future leaders, youth-led organizing says you're a leader right now. Now, when we invest in youth leadership in the present, we're not just shaping those strong professionals, we're cultivating lifelong change makers. That's the power of youth-led, organizing. Now, if we want the youth-led organizing to thrive, we have to build the right structure around it. This is the last, between the structures, the pitfalls, and what success is going to look like. That's gonna mean making sure that there's consistent funding. We have to ensure that the youth can receive stipends for their time, get transportation to and from meetings, and have access to safe, welcoming space to gather. It also means updating organizational policies to reflect shared leadership. You should have a voice in hiring decisions, budget planning, and the overall direction of programs. And just as importantly, the spaces we create must be safe and affirming, especially for the LGBTQIA plus community youth, immigrants, youth with disabilities, and those who are justice involved or justice impacted. But even with the best intentions, there are common traps that we need to avoid. One of the biggest is tokenism, adding a couple of youth to a board or to a panel just to check the box and to say that, hey, we've got youth on our board or they're providing us with strategy. No, no, no. We got to do more than that. And we have to make sure that we understand that this level of tokenism, the token youth, is an area that we have to be cognizant to avoid in terms of a pitfall. Then there's adultism. That's the idea that, the adults, us leaders, automatically know better, which can lead to dismissing or minimizing youth perspectives. We can't forget about overloading, where we're placing the weight of fixing these deeply rooted systemic problems on youth without giving them the tools, the support, or mental health resources. They need to, or the resources, excuse me, to be able to sustain that work. That's not empowerment, that's exploitation, just so you're aware. So, what does success actually look like? It's when youth identify an issue in their community and lead a campaign that results in real change. Now, whether that's shifting policy or changing public perception, it's seeing young people serve on school boards, city councils, and coalitions as equal partners, not just observers, not just bystanders, and ultimately success in a community culture where youth don't need special permission to lead. They are expected to lead. Now, because we know that when youth are trusted, supported, and resourced, they don't just rise, they're going to lift everyone up around them. Now, community conditions and youth power. Let's be clear, youth aren't just talking about the issues, they're living them. For young people in disinvested communities, things like poverty, violence, underfunded schools and limited mental health support aren't abstract topics. These challenges are their day-to-day reality. When we talk about policy, they're living in consequences of those policies every single day. And yet, despite all of that, these young people continue to rise. They take their pain and turn it into power. They organize walkouts, build mutual, aid networks. They, start healing circles and they push for change, not just for themselves, but for their communities. Now, this work isn't about activism, it's about healing, it's about resilience and reclaiming dignity through action. See, the truth is, the youth don't need our permission. And I'll say this again, they're already leading. What they need from us is power. Now, that means access to funding, seats at decision-making tables, the adults who, walk alongside them instead of trying to steer the ship. When we stop trying to control the youth leadership and start investing in it, this is where that real transformation is going to happen for them. And in turn, it's going to happen for all of us. This is, again, as I've stated, is already happening. And how is it already happening? Look at some of these stories that is already happening right now. You have Zuriel, Kiana, and Gabriel Kim, who started a nonprofit business called Code. It was called, I believe it was called, you got the
Code
excuse,
equity.
Code Equity. Thank you, Ms. Beverly. They started Code Equity where they wanted to teach young kids how to code, how to be on systems. Not only that, but also give individuals and families that do not have computers in their house, laptops, so that they would be able to, try to, bridge that digital gap. They're already starting it. The ages that are in there in the parentheses right next to their names, as you can see, is 14 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old. They're already started. Let's look at Michael Valdez. He was 19 years old in 2022 when he was elected Edgewood ISD Board of Trustees. Board of Trustees for the Edgewood ISD at 19 years old. Something that's relatively new that I'm sure everyone knows today. I mean, Rick Galvan, District 6, 24 years old, elected, elected 24 years old to start leading District 6 and representing District 6. When we take a look at District 2, back when in 21, when, Jalen McKee Rodriguez, he was 26, you know? And then we take a look at, Fernando Rodriguez, 27 at the MLK Commission, youth chair, first Latina. It's happening already. We're starting to see it. I have another one that some may find controversial. You have to excuse me. I just wanted to pull and exemplify how these individuals are younger and younger. Thomas Fugate, who actually went to school at UTSA, 22, was appointed by President Trump to lead the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships at the Department of Homeland Securities. 22 years old. And we adults are saying that, these youth do not have, leadership capabilities or abilities. The paradigm shift has come and is already coming. But with that, we have to find ways and ensure that we build and sustain these youth movements. We have to create infrastructure that honors the youth leadership. The youth organizing is not just a one-time event. It's going to be a sustained movement. Movements need consistent meeting spaces, communication tools, flexible funding. We're going to need to be in a position where we build intergenerational infrastructure, where youth set the vision and adults support the continuity of it. We're going to have to invest in systems that include youth on advisory boards, grant review panels, and hiring committees, when we talk about that infrastructure. Now, if you look at the second puzzle piece right there, where we are going to have to ensure movement are, youth design, not adult defined, youth should define the issues, demand, and tactics. The adults need to rally, the adults need to allies. We have to shift from being directors to really being facilitators and mentors for the youth. We're going to have to avoid that adultism, as I spoke earlier, by checking those, checking whose voice is prioritized in meetings, materials, and media appearances. When in doubt, ask, are youth just present or are they in power? When we look at this other puzzle piece down here, the youth, the resource youth like you mean it, resource youth like you mean it, Youth deserve to be paid for their labor. We need to provide stipends, transportation, food. Some of the youth may have children, they're going to need childcare. They're going to need digital access. We need to fund their emotional and mental health support, for these young organizers, especially when they're empowering, but it could also be emotionally taxing. We need to support training in organizing skills, policy advocacy, media literacy, facilitation, budgeting, digital safety. Another puzzle piece for sustaining youth movements is to center relationships, not just outcomes. Movements they're sustained by trust, by care, and being accountable. We have to build strong peer-to-peer bonds, mentorship loops, and rituals of celebration. When they do well, I mean, we celebrate. We celebrate, ask, what it is that, typically these youth want. And a lot of times it's just to get out of that trauma-filled community area, whether it's in a movie theater where they feel safe to watch a movie, go hit some golf balls over at a Top Golf or iFly because they feel like they'll be able to skydive or they're too afraid to do these things. We do, ritualize the celebration of their wins and victories and progress. We also need to check in often, not just to ask about tasks, but about wellness, support needs, and shared purpose. Uh, Also, we ensure that adults or allies, are also doing their own work around power, privilege, and capacity building. I could go on in each of these spaces, but Ann, I see it's 8:34, and I could talk, some more about the, making space for, rest and reflection, to build a culture of legacy and then measuring impact in many meaningful ways. But I can go ahead and cut it off here and just go into questions also if you like.
Well, what I'd like to do is one, thank you. I mean, such clarity. I encourage you while I ramble a bit, but David, to even go into chat and kind of read stuff that's been happening there. So anyone who might need to leave at this point, feel free to do so. And thank you for being with us today and into this really important conversation. It's not a new one, which I indicated earlier, but we're stepping into it so that there's more of this conversation happening. We're seeing so many more efforts, as David mentioned at the beginning, in terms of young people coming together around mental health or voting, or we can just make the list. And I put in there that I think it's such a, in one sense, it's such a subtle shift. It's kind of mental geography that impacts how we work out in the world, right? So it's a shift to, how, young people, can we get young people to gather together? How do we do that? Well, there's a million ways, right? But the question really in this model is why? Why are we doing this? And why are young people coming together? So it's that kind of important shift. I want to go ahead and let's see, what do I want to do next? I'm not quite sure what we're doing next Thursday, so I'm not going to go there, but we are meeting. I think I want to go and open this up to Q&A. I just got so many things in my head yesterday. So if any folks want to start raising their hand, yesterday I went to City Council where they confirmed the votes and then, proceeded to make the shift. And one council person mentioned, my councilman, Jalen, mentioned that there were two on the current council, as of yesterday's current council, who were born in the 1990s, and how he was looking forward to the first person on the council who was born in the 2000s. And we do have, Rick is born in the 2000s. And shoot, I think too of even the faith-based initiative. If we look back at that history and how it was formed, it was brought forward by the youngest council person at that time, who was in his 20s and now is leading communities and schools on the national level. Great example. So we don't have to, like, make a case made. Has been made. We just need to take it seriously and be intentional in that mind shift and what we're doing. Beverly, your hand's up.
Yes, I just want to say, David, that was an excellent presentation. And I think you found another one of your purposes, and God is ordering those steps. So keep it up and good work. I was also going to say that when you talked about support, people think of because people think of that in several ways. I just wanted to just put this on the table for everyone. That support, when you do have young people working with you, there are different ways to work with you. Fernanda, we were very blessed. Fernanda Rodriguez, who served on the MLK Commission, started with West Care as an AmeriCorps member. And before she was appointed, I got calls from both the commissioner and the city council, and they talked to me about her. And I told them, I said, I will be supportive of her, and she will be able to take off time from her job to be able to do this. And I just want to be able to just say that there are lots of ways for us to support people. And so give yourselves the bandwidth and be creative in how we can support that. And with the activities that she did, she certainly leaned on us to help make the things she was responsible for, successful. And we supported her on that. So I just wanted to be able to say that that's also another way that we can support young people, is if we are employing them to help give them the space for them to do some of these things.
And I think also when we talk about support, it does include funding, right?
It does.
We generally, when we start to move into these directions, right?
Yes.
Like everybody just kind of brings their whole being into it. And that's what it's going to take. But it also takes funding, right?
It does take funding.
Yep. So Virginia has her hand up.
Hi, thank you, Anne, and thank you, David. That was a great presentation. I recently developed a model, and your model does have a lot of the same elements as mine. But part of that model that I created is also how to generate power. And so, and you're right, it does take a power source to tap into, and from there you generate your own power. But you do need that initial source. And for example, the model that we created was through a study that I conducted, and it was through my parish. And so using the folks in the parish that I knew, we were able to I was able to discover how you can generate power through these relationships. And it's really, I mean, it's about the relationships, it's about the stories, it's about bridging relationships and bonding relationships, and then um, acting. That acting part is very important because that all these elements generate power, or what I call doses of power, and power for the common good. But more than that, they also move us. They move the heart and they move our bodies to act, and that's where that power comes in. Really, what it is, it's love. It's called radio. It's called radio energy, which really is love. Taylor Desjardins talks about it in his book on the cosmic Christ, and really that's what he's referring to. It's that love for the common good that moves us to action. And so we have to use our bodies and our minds to keep that going and build those relationships, not just relationships with people that are like us, but people that are different from us, that live in different areas of town, so that we can create that energy and that power that's needed to take collective action. And not only that, but to sustain engagement, civic engagement, and the organization.
I just have to share something too. I love that radial power, that wow, There's a term, right? I noticed in chat, Alton, who's from Good Samaritan, also with the last name Davis, which makes me wonder if David and Alton are related. But and they have started a new program for 18 to 26, and I serve on the international board for the Charter for Compassion. I have to give this example. And there's a couple things I want to remember, but when I started serving that board a couple years ago, I was the youngest person on the board, and I'm not that young. So I started to challenge them to bring with them to the next board meeting, which can be replicated in any going to, right? But that the next time they came, to bring somebody that was at least half their age and didn't look like this, didn't look like them. That board is now led 2 years later by people who are in their mid 30s to mid 20s. And the vibrancy and the vision, I mean, I really hope everybody is like searching all their, like, whatever their sacred scriptures or stories are. This is not new thought, right? Let the children lead, let them come, let them do it, right? And so it has changed a global effort, and they offer conferences for young people globally online, and they have thousands show up. It's just amazing what it's done. The other thing, in every conversation around young people, eventually at some point it comes up, well, what age are we talking about? And when we say youth, I heard something the other day and I thought, well, you know, that's powerful. Somebody said 13 to 31. That was at one. It's easy to think, right? 13, 1, 3 to 3, 1, 31, give or take, right? Of course they're younger, and of course they're older. And I don't know, even though I am the age I am, I think I'm much younger inside. I'm not that old. But I thought that was a really great parameter to think of in terms of when we're talking about youth. But the other thing that I've also seen across the years, and it's in research as well, is how humans best model, become role models, right? And if you think about it, it's not rocket science, it's human, but it's like always like the next generation. That doesn't mean that we can't learn from somebody who's like 30 years older than us, right? But that it's usually like the early 30s who tend to communicate and model best to the late 20s. So, you know, like in formation of things, in the late 20s seem to model and be able to communicate best to the earlier 20s. And the earlier 20s seem to model and communicate best with the late teens. And the late teens with the early teens. And the early teens with those in middle school. I mean, camps kind of work like that, right? So I just thought those two things, and I got them both from young people, that 13 to 31, and that generational, close generational modeling and communication. I think it's just important information we could all learn from and utilize. It is 8:46, so we're a minute past our usual time. Sorry with my ramblings, but just had to share that information. So David, thank you so much for stepping up to this with just a couple days notice. I just thought with the transition that's happening in terms of leadership in the larger scale, that this youth leadership was an important conversation to have this day. We got to get it into the ground, and it will create community. And as San Antonio becomes even larger than the 7th largest city, that we will be creating that everywhere and knitting that together across our geography. So thank you all so much. Please remember that all of these are recorded, at sacred.org. And people do this. They use these recordings when they're trying to tell their team, their congregation, their organization, a friend, whoever it is. I heard and was a part of this amazing conversation. Instead of telling them about it is really great, but you can go straight to the recording and get the meat of it or whatever part of it and really move this conversation along. So we will contact you, Virginia. Thank you all for being here this morning. Have great weekends, and we'll see you next week at the intersection.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You
Thank
too.
you, Ed.